Welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at another technique and strategy when we're looking at and thinking about texture on our pen drawings. I do a lot of hatching work, and the way that lines are applied when you use hatching implies certain things about the texture of the object. So we're going to be taking a look at 5 different examples today of different ways we can use our lines in order to imply the surface texture of an object. We're starting off right here. And you'll notice I pre-drew all of these. It's easier for me to draw the curves with the ability to rotate the paper and my wrist, but that makes it harder for this kind of demonstration. So if you want to pause right here and draw yourself some cylinders, that would be a good and understandable idea. A quick tip if you're doing that, start with your oval. Give yourself your lines for where your oval is going to go, and then try to create an exact replica of that oval. Then if you simply erase this line, like so, you will end up with a pretty tolerable cylinder. They don't need to be perfect though. We are working primarily on surface texture, so precision of your oval, of your cylinder is not super important. So let's take a look at our first one. This one, we are thinking about a glossy surface. This is a highly reflective, very polished surface. And so our shadows are likewise going to be similarly polished. I am going to have to rotate the paper a couple times just to make sure that I can get the lines at the right angle. Our wrists only move in one direction really proficiently. And so whatever feels most natural for you when you're trying to do these kind of things, go ahead and go with that. I know there is a temptation to feel like you have to follow through with what you're seeing here on the internet, but the reality is there are a lot of tricks when people are recording videos that make things easier for them. I often, when I'm drawing for myself, will rotate my paper. There is no shame in it. And I would encourage you to find the angle that works best for you. For most of my students over the years, it was usually a diagonal angle. That usually seemed to function the best for the vast majority of my students. So on this shadow, I am allowing it to be curved. It just kind of implies that we've got a glossy, polished surface, something like a brand new car or a vehicle or metal that's been waxed. I'm going to have a secondary little shadow up here as if something else is catching the light that is prevented from hitting the object from something else. And I'm actually going to add in a little bit of textural lines as well, kind of mirroring the slope of the actual surface itself. You have to be careful when you're doing this. If you do too much of it, it will look like there's some scratches on the surface, but in a limited fashion like this, it will simply start to imply that there are probably other things around that are reflecting on that surface. So this one's pretty simple. You could go quite a bit more if the light source was more extreme. Maybe this dark area would be farther up. This is the least interesting of these to me, but especially if you have a piece that's highly textured, having surfaces like this where most of it is left white or whatever color you're working with, and there are really strong curved shadows will imply that it's glossy, it's smooth, or it's polished. So this is going to be our shiny one. And then let's go ahead and move on to our next, which I am just simply calling standard. Perhaps you could call this dull as well, that would function. And in this one, we are essentially just going to use normal hatching marks to give ourselves the surface texture and imply that this is a non-polished surface that is being hit by the light normally. I'm going to start here at the bottom using some curved lines mirroring this arc of the cylinder, wrapping themselves around. This is probably a form of cross-contour shading. These marks are going to start off small as I'm near the edge of the object, and then they will get longer and bigger, as you can see right now, as I begin to work my way up the object. I'm trying to be intentional about every mark I make. It's part of the almost meditative practice of working with ink like this. As I hit this third tier of marks, I am trying to make my marks just ever so slightly further apart from one another, so it looks like they're getting lighter. This next step, which is almost vertical because of the haphazard way in which I drew this cylinder, you're going to see that it does start to look a little bit lighter. This is approximating what shading would look like. Now, as I get to the slope going up around the object, I'm going to vary the length of my marks a little bit. This kind of implies that the light source perhaps isn't perfect. Maybe it's not hitting from directly above. And then we're going to fade into the highlight at the top of the object with much more interspersed hatching. Anything else I do up here is just going to imply that there's an error, a mark in that surface that is an imperfection. Now, as I look back at this, I'm going, well, I need to add a little bit more darkness down here, and it's totally fine. Don't feel like you have to or should get everything on your first go. Drawing is a complicated thing, and fortunately, we always have the ability to go back and look at what we've done and modify it as need be. But you can see there, that's a pretty standard way of doing this. Maybe I should connect these a little bit more. And we're basically approximating a general, standard, non-scarred, non-polished surface. The addition of these marks up here does make it look as if it might be marred, but you could easily leave those out and it will just look like a nicely shaded cylinder. Let's move on to the next one, which is going to be just an object that is a little bit more dirty. It's going to have a little bit of cross-hatching, which is the first time we're going to put it in there. But actually, before we do, let's take a look at something interesting. So I have done all of this with cross-contour hatching here. Well, what if we did contour hatching, where we went directly along the side of the object? And I prepped this one down here to allow for that. So let's say that we did this instead. We would use the same strategy, where we would just vary how close together our marks are as they're going up the object. And we will get an effect that will be very, very similar, but we'll have a different appearance to it. And you, as the artist, can decide which best serves the goal that you are trying to achieve in that moment. So I'm going to go ahead and just work this up. Same thing, having the lines get further apart, / smaller and lighter as we go up the object. And we will see what we get. I'm going to go back down just like I did on the other one and re-darken this in. And let's see what that looks like in comparison to the other one. And neither of these is correct or incorrect. We just have our habits. I tend to draw this way, but this has a nice look to it as well. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's the way that you wanted to do it, that would work fine as well. So this would just be two forms of that standard. Now let's jump over to our next one. So this one we're actually going to mix those two, so it's going to work nicely for us. This is going to be a marred surface, and I pray that I'm spelling that correct. We're going to start it off very much the same way, but I am going to use some longer marks here initially. Again, trying to keep each of these hatching marks in line with the curvature of the object itself. When you do that, that just helps to reinforce the three-dimensionality of the object, which is a subtle way of just increasing the reality of whatever it is you're working with. So this is a surface that's been probably beat up. Maybe this is a can or a pipe that's been left out in the sun and the elements for a couple dozen years. So let's, that by itself doesn't look too bad. Kind of looks interesting. We're going to go ahead and add a little bit of cross-hatching on this one. And you'll notice I'm turning my paper because I can make these kinds of marks much more easily when I make them toward myself. So we are going to do the same thing. We're actually going to allow the cross-hatching to give us most of our shading, just like we did on this one that I did a moment ago. None of these is better or more correct than another. This is certainly not a situation of like 5 levels of shading. It's like, no, these are all just different. They're going to serve different purposes. And especially when you're in a large drawing where you're using hatching as a primary technique, it's good to have things to break up that monotony. You can very easily separate one object from another by simply having a different form of hatching and shading. So this is a little bit more banged up of a surface. I kind of like this one more, honestly, than this. but that's because there is a little bit more complication in this. Sometimes cross-hatching is something I avoid, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's an easier technique to get things kind of ugly. I know that's not a good way of saying that, but you can accidentally make things ugly by cross-hatching unintentionally. In this format where, my lines are not just simply cross-hatched this way or randomly, these lines are all in line with something. These hatching lines are going with the length of the cylinder, the other ones are wrapping around it. So both in that capacity help. Now we're going to go with a bumpy surface. This is bumpy or scarred. Oh, I think that's 2 R's. Otherwise it would be scared. But maybe it is scared. In this one, we're going to experiment with what happens if we don't really care about the direction that our hatching takes, if we vary that back and forth. Perhaps I'll start right off the bat by the same way that I have, keeping these marks in line, but then what happens if I shift that? If these marks are going a different direction? As long as I keep the density of my hatching marks akin to one another, it should function. This is the can that's been outside for a long time. Maybe it's been kicked around as a, soccer ball a little bit. And so we are going to probably still keep about half of our hatching lines in the direction going around the object, curving with it. But we are going to have some that are just random. And if we do this correctly, though it's going to be a little bit chaotic at the beginning, it should imply that this is still wrapping around, that it's getting brighter as we get up. So the same thing is going to happen. We are going to get our lines a little bit further apart from each other as we get further up on the cylinder. And I probably will go back on that bottom just like I did in previous ones and darken some things later. Totally fine. But as we come up towards this center point, where the light really is starting to fade, then we are going to get some hatching marks that are not nearly as close together as the ones that were down below. I'm also going to experiment here with what if there's a pock mark on this object. So what I'm going to do here is actually hatch quite a bit darker than the stuff surrounding, and then right below that fade it into the stuff around it. What I'm implying there is that we have a little mark where this is a divot. So as the light comes this way, you get a little shadow cast here on the inside of that divot, which is the opposite if you had a bump. So let's say we had something like this that is an actual protruding bump. Light's coming from the same angle. It's going to be shaded on this far side. And you can see how that works. I probably will take an entire episode at some point and talk about how to shade things that are indents versus, bumps that are coming out of an object. But this is the basic of it. So that's a little pockmark. We're going to do another one up here at the top. We're going to continue to apply some texture. Maybe these are just little marks from where the object is scarred. Maybe they are still applying some shadow. So this is going to be a second pockmark. It's obviously going to fade into the white rather than fade into the darkness that we have down below. And I'm going to get some more hatching marks up here. I also noticed that I haven't done anything with the front of these objects. You totally could. I just don't care right now. That's not what I'm focused on. I'm focusing on the what's happening is it's wrapping around the object, because that's going to be, I think, a lot more applicable to most people. All right, so this last one you'll notice is not, we don't have the rest of the cylinder. So this is the crunched one. And this is going to be the can or the object that really the surface has totally deteriorated on. So rather than have our nice, beautiful cylinders we had on the last one, we're actually going to have a surface texture that is totally messed up. We're still going to emulate that shape of a cylinder. And on this one, we're going to use pretty much the same strategies here, but we're going to try to pay attention to each of these angles that we've artificially created, almost like you would on a rock, and see how that works. So let's go ahead. I'm going to start here with just following each of these shapes And our hatching is going to be wildly different from area to area. And as we saw in that last one, that should work fine. We should get something that still looks cohesive and coherent. Maybe not, but hopefully. This object is the can that has been kicked around and then buried underneath the ground and maybe survived the apocalypse. So this guy has some stories. And as such, we're going to imply that each of these lines has a story behind it. It is a scar from a life that has been difficult. I'm darkening this chunk a little bit more here because this to me looks like an overhang, and that implies that we're going to have some increased darkness. So I'm going to have another chunk over here almost as if this crack has run throughout the entirety of that object. When you do that, it's not a bad idea then to have the area right above it be a little bit artificially lighter, because if you do have a lip that's protruding, often that will be catching the light, which will then create an even greater level of contrast underneath. All right, we're working our way up towards the halfway point on the object where the light is going to start being far more bright. Seems to me like there's almost a crack right here that does it, because there's a teeny little angle right there. So I'm going to kind of use that as my break point here. I'm going to have some hatching that comes across, and then everything above that is going to be dynamically lighter. So we're still going to be, using our hatching marks up here, but they're going to be much more interspersed. We are going to allow this to be kind of a crack coming down the object, and we'll have some hatching around that as well. Maybe we'll get some other stuff in here. Maybe it's a raised crack, like it's been pushed out from the inside from extra pressure. These little chunks that are raised up here should have their own hatching, because they're probably going to have tiny little shadows, especially if the light source is just a teeny bit back behind this object. But we are on the home stretch here. All right, I'm going to come back on this bottom portion like I mentioned earlier and just fill in some gaps and darken in the areas on the bottom. Trying now not to use any cross-hatching. I don't think it would cause any problems, but I just want to be consistent. So I'm trying to follow the direction of each of these layers that I threw down initially and just darken them in a bit. That way we'll end up with a greater level of contrast as we get up closer to that midpoint. Contrast is important. It's one of the first things that our eyes look for. Generally speaking, if your painting or drawing or whatever is not working, the biggest issue is likely contrast levels. You run into this a ton if you're doing landscapes and things that have backgrounds on them. All right, that looks a lot better. I am going to add just some random dots. I find that they help with texture being a little bit more convincing. Ironically, though it's such a simple strategy, it's one that I've only started employing rather recently. So there. Those are we're not going to perfectly be able to fit them, but those are our 5 different techniques and strategies for kind of showing shading through texture, giving us the ability to use different ways of hatching to imply the surface texture of that object. In the future, I'm going to work on things like how do you do this with hair or with scales or with particular and specific textures, but this seemed a good place to start, a rational place to start with this. So, as always, thanks for being here. I hope this video was helpful, and I would love to hear from you which of these you found the most interesting or most applicable for your art. In addition, if you have anything specifically you'd like to see in my ink technique or practice episodes coming forward, just let me know in the comments. Thank you to my patrons who are on the screen right now. If you want to check out my Patreon, it's linked below. But definitely check out the Discord server, which is also linked below. It's a totally free community that you can join and be a part of and get feedback on your artwork, share the things that you're working on. And I think I'm probably going to open up a portion in there that is specifically concerning practice for the videos. So you could do stuff like this, put it in there, get some feedback, or maybe just encouragement on what that looks like. Well, have a good one, y'all. See you soon.